Hello, I'm attorney Todd Leneve. Welcome to West Virginia Gun Law. In today's ongoing conversation with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA coach Josh Fowler, we get into the concept of proportionality, which is one of the key elements defined as part of a self-defense claim or establishing a self-defense claim under West Virginia law and really under the law of every other state that allows a self-defense argument. We take a look at the legal aspects and definitions, as well as get some opinion from Josh regarding how he teaches proportionality at his gym in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I think it's an interesting and important part of this ongoing discussion that we've had with him. I hope you stick around and enjoy it. For those of you who haven't yet subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit that like button, share this video. I'd love to get this series spread out to more people and get the viewer numbers up. That would be a tremendous help, I think, for the channel and for Josh as well, and for everybody who hasn't seen these yet, because I think there is a lot of good info that we've been able to put together here. So, without any further ado, please stick around for part 6.
We had mentioned earlier when you were talking about the 5 points, proportionality, that which, we simplify it into basically weapons or no weapons and who has it in their hand. If they have a weapon and I don't, if I have a weapon and they don't, or if we both have weapons, and then also, the physical stature, the physicality of the situation that it's in. There are people who, I'm a trained person. I have skills that help, even that playing field against someone bigger and stronger than me, so that can kind of help me kind of proportionalize to what they're doing and give an appropriate response without going overboard. But at the same time, sometimes I would be the bigger, stronger person, and sometimes I would be so much more skilled than another person that I would have to limit what I do.
Right.
One of the reasons jiu-jitsu is so good, jiu-jitsu and wrestling are fantastic for self-defense with considerations to the legal aftermath. The ability to control an individual without actually, I can twist somebody into a pretzel without having to, beat them. Smash their face in or pull a weapon. If I'm lucky, I'd never want to go into an assault in a disproportional. If you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck. Right. You always want to kind of go up one, but you have to be able to use it the right way. So I'll talk about that in a second too. Let me hear your thoughts on how some of the things that swirl around proportionality, like weapons, gender, size, and training.
Sure. Yeah. So proportionality is one of those areas that can so easily be the turning point of a defense, and often it's a result of I think a lack of understanding by the people analyzing or evaluating that defensive encounter that took place, and just concluding, well, because you came out on top, you used too much force. Interestingly, I won't go into all the details of it, but I had a case years ago in which my client was battered, physical contact of insulting, provoking nature, by a woman. Now, my client was probably 6'2" and every bit of 340, 350 pounds, big guy.
Yeah.
The woman testified under oath that she was 125, so I'll say she was 125 because she testified under oath.
Blink, blink.
But she battered him after essentially a 2-year buildup. Not only did she make physical contact, she threw a liquid on him and then reached under the hem of her sweatshirt And before she could complete that act, my client sprayed her with a half-second burst of a bear spray. Ended the confrontation. He got arrested and charged with criminal battery and trespass, even though it was on his property.
Weird.
Again, not getting deeply into all the details.
I get it.
This could be a whole
That's a
show
conundrum.
on its own. But the bottom line is, he chose what I believe was the least intrusive response to that threat that was made to him. And again, this followed 2 years of verbal threats, nasty interactions, all kinds of things going on, and it finally became physical. So there is a gross disproportion between a 340-pound man and a 125-pound woman. As I told you earlier, I went to law school because I had no professional prospects in either math or science. But I understand enough about physics to know that 340 pounds thrusting into 125 pounds is going to result in that woman going, as my grandfather used to say, ass over tin cup. And this was in an area where there were stumps and things along the ground where he had been clearing the property boundary to put up a fence. She could have hit one of those. She could have died. He chose the least intrusive response, yet he was the one that got charged. Ultimately, he was found not guilty at trial. But it just illustrates that even if you do the right thing, there are still going to be consequences because of somebody else's interpretation of that interaction. But see, I say all that to sort of talk about some of the points with proportionality. I often like to share with people, if you take an average unarmed man and an average unarmed woman, neither one with any kind of fight training, anything like that, the woman walks up to the man and shoves him. The guy ought to apologize and walk away and say, why apologize? Well, because in the end it was going to be found to be our fault anyway. So, but walk away. That's not generally a threat to us. If that was, Ronda Rousey or Holly Holm, I'm punching a chick because that's a whole different dynamic. We're talking about in this scenario the average person.
Beat me to death.
Yeah, exactly.
And I sure know how to fight.
Right, same here. So, when we reverse the roles there, though, if that man walks up to that woman and shoves her, well, he presents a risk of danger to her. Men are naturally stronger. It's just a simple biological fact. Now, again, there are some women who are exceptional, but we're talking here about an average woman, average man. And so the man actually does present a risk, a disproportionate risk to that woman. So gender comes into play when we look at proportionality. Things like age. Somebody who's elderly versus somebody who's young and fit, there's a definite disproportion there. The older person who maybe, has been around the sun quite a few times and has some physical limitations, can't do what they once could, is at a definite disadvantage against a young, able-bodied attacker. Numbers, a single defender versus multiple aggressors. That single defender is at a distinct disadvantage. Physical infirmities, even if you're relatively similarly situated as between the aggressor and the defender, but the defender has some infirmity. I was speaking to a class one time, and a guy came up to me during the break and revealed that he had a plate in his head because of a brain disorder, and he was told that if he would take a punch, which traditionally is considered a non-lethal type of force, for him, being punched in the head could cause him death.
Yes.
And so he asked me, what's my right? And I said, well, the great thing is under our law, you don't have to whip out a medical card and say, hey, before you attack me, just want to let you know I've got some medical infirmities. Don't punch me in the head, okay? Anything else, you don't have to do that. You know what your limitations are coming into that encounter. And if you know, hey, I am particularly vulnerable, I have the right to up my response against something that may otherwise, just from the face of it, look like a proportional encounter, but in fact it was significantly disproportional because of that infirmity. So you get into all these different factors that come into play when we talk about proportion from the legal standpoint. And the way you teach, talking about weapon on weapon, things like that, that's great, and we need to understand that. But when we then take it out of the street and into the courtroom, we're now talking about a different level of proportionality and a different analysis of proportionality. And again, even though it may have been a good response to the threat, somebody may see it a different way. And I've got a couple of cases going right now that I think are moving in a favorable direction, but where police officers, astoundingly to me, made arrest decisions of my clients who I think have clear arguments for self-defense. And once these cases resolve, I'll be doing a video on those to talk about them. And, be able to share, hey, let's look at the details, the breakdown of this. But yeah, it's, when we're talking about weapons, obviously it could be a deadly weapon versus a non-deadly weapon. And you've got to be very cautious about determining the manner of your response to ensure that you haven't stepped outside, you haven't escalated. In your instance, with the training background that you've got, the typical drug addict, homeless person who might come up and accost you for whatever change you've got and try to start a fight, you've got to be cautious. Even though you did nothing wrong, you're going to be the guy who's under the microscope because of your training, your background. And so for anybody that is trained, anybody that has any kind of real skill, you've got to be measured in your response. And there's no such thing as these hands are registered as deadly weapons. That's not a thing. But it does come into play in court when we say, well, you left this guy a broken and bloody heap, when maybe a simple takedown and restraint could have done the job.
Yes.
And so it's very, very critical that your response is measured, that it's proportional.
Yes.
To the nature of the threat that's presented. If I'm walking down the street, little old lady comes out of the quilting club and the door that I'm walking by and hits me with a walker, I can't turn around and punch her in the face.
You can,
I
but
can't.
you shouldn't.
I shouldn't. Yeah. Legally, I should not.
No.
But if she whips that walker up and it's like a 4-barrel Gatling gun, well, okay, a little different story.
Yeah.
But again, we have to look at the nature of the parties and the nature of the threat presented when we're talking about proportionality. And there's so many things that come into play. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's why it's so critical that, especially as a martial artist, if you find yourself in a scenario where you've had to defend and somebody else has come in after the fact and interpreted things as you going too far, you need an attorney who understands it.